green tech in general, and just to establish my bona fides here, I've got a solar system on my house. I believe in the climate change data. I'm not a skeptic on that. I'm a skeptic on the technologies that we seem to have all latched onto to fix it. So whether you're looking at wind or solar, whether you're looking at EVs or e-trucks, the materials that you need, you're talking in excess of an order of magnitude more in order to build the stuff compared to conventional tech. So for example, your conventional car has about 2 pounds of copper and maybe 5 or 6 pounds of nickel. Your average electric car needs, 130 of each. It needs all kinds of materials that we don't normally put into vehicles, and they have a global supply chain and global sourcing, most of which are in very uncomfortable places. So, 60% of the cobalt comes from one place, and the second biggest source just went offline in Russia. So while we can't have inexpensive oil without the Russians, we absolutely cannot have the green transition without the Russians. And that plays for almost every piece of everything. In the Western Hemisphere, to a degree, this is less true because a lot of those raw materials are sourced here or maybe in Australia. I expect that to still work. But if you're in Eurasia or Africa, no, absolutely not.
Half of Tesla's sales in this last quarter were lithium iron phosphate. So don't have
those itty bitty cars in China.
Tesla doesn't sell itty bitty cars, so they
do in China. That's the lithium iron battery.
It's a Model 3 though. It's not a different footprint.
It's low capacity, low passengers, low range. I'm not saying it's inappropriate for the market. It's very appropriate for the market. I'm just saying that is not a battery that will translate without some significant changes into a broader transport overhaul.
Well, actually, all their standard range vehicles, so not just China, are now lithium iron phosphate. So the point is that like Tesla can do that because they have really, really efficient drivetrain and power electronics. Other manufacturers just aren't there yet, and so they can't deliver the range required to actually sell those vehicles in Western markets. I agree.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been on a lot of calls recently with people from Tesla, and that just does not feel right.
What does not feel right?
All of that. The idea that they're not using cobalt anymore outside of China. The idea that the Tesla system has a better range than the competition.
That's objectively true. You don't have to rely on us for that. If you adjust for the cost of manufacture of the vehicle, they're 3 or 4 years ahead in terms of range per cost. Don't you think that these technologies, so the fact that you have a solar system on your house, I have a solar system on my house, I have a solar system paired with a battery, it would provide me sufficient energy, disconnected from the grid for 99% of my needs. That provides people a mechanism by which to be essentially self-sovereign. And the same with
if
Starlink.
You live in a place with good solar potential, if you've got a house battery system, then sure.
Then I pay for everything in Bitcoin. I don't even need a nation state to guarantee my money supply, and I can participate economically. Aren't those all?
Yeah, sorry. Bitcoin's a dumpster fire. That's we're. I mean, what you described with having a house with solar and a battery system, that might work for about a tenth, maybe a tenth of the U.S. population. We're the first world country with the best solar profile, but if you're not in a kind of a belt from central Texas to Los Angeles, roughly, you're not going to have enough solar intensity to be able to power a house. Also remember that if you've got a 6 kilowatt solar system, which is about as big as you can put on most houses, it's going to take 3 days to charge your Tesla, assuming you're not using the power for anything else. I think these are all interesting technologies. I just don't think we're there yet.
Really, their only option is nuclear, and some of them aren't even necessarily sophisticated enough to operate the complex nuclear, infrastructure that they need. So I guess
that might be a bigger list than you're thinking on nuclear. It is 1950s technology. We should improve it, obviously, but I think that nuclear is going to be a bigger part of the future than a lot of people think because, believe it or not, its supply chain is simpler. Even with non-proliferation concerns, it's simpler than it is for solar panels.
Do you think that each country has a renewable energy future with energy independence?
I don't think so, no. With today's technology, it might change in time. Well, it will change in time. With today's technology, we're talking Australia, the United States, Mexico, Britain, Denmark, assuming they can get their head out of their asses, Argentina, and Chile. Those are the only countries in the world that have a good enough green tech, solar, and wind profile to theoretically get more than half of their electricity from a really robust build out. And that I'm not counting the cheating that places like Denmark are currently doing, where they have a lot of wind towers, but they still source the majority of their power from the European grid. I'm talking about if you're doing a standalone national system, those are the only ones. It doesn't mean that it can't help at the margins for other places, but our energy intensity and the energy density problems of solar and wind just haven't been surmounted yet in other locations where it's less favorable.
Some people basically call out Germany's policy to move away from coal and move more into natural gas as kind of, wow, look at how environmental policy basically opened them up.
Oh, it's so much worse than what you're suggesting. It's so much worse. Okay, so they didn't move away from coal. They're using more coal than they've ever used, and that was before the war. They now get their single largest fuel source is lignite. Their number 2 source is coal. Their big mistake was shutting down nuclear if your goal is to be carbon neutral. And I'm not saying that the Germans are stupid. They live in a very difficult neighborhood, and anything you can do in that neighborhood to make one neighbor hate you less is generally a good thing. And whenever the Germans and the Russians hate each other, things get very real very fast. So I understand why they did it. But I would hold out Germany as the shining example of how green tech doesn't work in most places, because they've built out 100, and I think they're up to 155% in terms of generating capacity, 155% of their peak demand in generating capacity from wind and solar, but only generates about 7% of their actual electricity because Germany is neither sunny nor windy. No doubt their politics is uniquely qualified at getting in the way. No problem there. But the problem is with green tech. So, I live in the highlands of Colorado. I'm at 7,500 feet. My solar panels do great. If I were to take those same solar panels and put them in Ontario, they would generate 18% of the electricity that I get here.
Solar power is interesting, but it's by no means a panacea.
Wind's better than solar.
Yeah. And also, I think that the biggest environmental mistake in the last, maybe ever, was like the move away from nuclear power and not driving down a cost decline in nuclear power generation globally.
I don't know if I'd put that at the top, but it definitely makes the top 5.